Okay, can you see mine?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Okay, so I have 43 slides, so I hope I can go through all those. So let me start with this. Okay, so here is Jeju, where I am. Here is the Gangjong village, Seogwipo city, where I am talking right now. So I have a question: why Jeju became the kind of that strategic foothold? It's us. It's we who wanted the militarization of Jeju, or who want the militarization of Jeju? Okay. So I'll start with this slide. If you see the map, the Jeju is located here. And then here is one of the U.S. Areas of responsibility that U.S. The Indo-Pacific Command. And many of you must be aware that here is China that the United States are confronting against. And if you understand this, many military bases and then facilities are surrounding China as well as Russia for the United States. And then if you see this, the screen is a little cut. The United States currently driving for the Quad strategy. The Quad means the United States, Japan, and then Australia and India. And then the United States also wants to include South Korea and then Vietnam and also New Zealand here. And then this is against the Chinese one belt and one road. So having this in mind, I'll show you the next slide, the current situation of the Jeju militarization. So now we know that we have a Jeju Navy base here. And in this east part, the Jeju second airport, which many people suspect to be an Air Force base, is being planned and then driven by the government. And then if you see this, here is the Halla Mountain, right? And then in the both sides of Halla Mountain, you see that there are plans to build a radar at the both sides. And then here is the Jeju International Airport. So it's and also what's happening is the building the military road, which connect the Gangjong base and then the second airport. And then we'll see there will be also many connections of the military bases and facilities. So today I want to share the militarization of Jeju in 6 stages. The first one is about the Japanese fortification of Jeju during the Sino-Japanese War and Pacific War. It is from the 1930s to 1945. So here is a map. If you see the map, this a little dark area is by 1936. And then it became bigger around 1942. I'm sharing this because the militarization of already started in the 1930s. So here, in the Jeju Island, the fighter plane would fly to China, Nanjing and Shanghai later. So when Jeju was liberated from Japan in 1945, Jeju had already been heavily militarized. And at the time, around 75,000 Japanese soldiers stationed in the Jeju, which is about 1/3 of the population of the Jeju Islanders at the time. And then if you see this part, the southwest part is heavily militarized, which will be one of our topics today. And then you will see the airplane at the bottom of the screen. That is the United States bomber B-29, which was the bomber to dropping the nuclear bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You know that. But it also flew over the sky of Jeju even before the liberation of Japan, because Jeju was the strategic foothold for Japan, and United States knew about that. So time is a little earlier, 1930s. And then if you remember the southwest region, which had been already heavily militarized, there was an old Japanese Navy airfield called Arthur at the time. And the Japanese airplanes flew from there to China, Shanghai, and Nanjing many times. And then it was before the Nanjing massacre, which started December 13th, 1937. So since the islanders of Jeju remember that tragic history, they have a ceremony of remembrance every December 13th since 2014. It was thanks to Emily who visited Nanjing at the time. So the second stage is after the liberation from Japan and then Korean War. So what happened in Jeju at the time? Okay, so during the April 3rd, you remember that the United States did blockade the Jeju when her attempt to have a separate election was failed in Jeju, right? It was May 10th, 1948, and then 2 days later, the United States warship Craig was on the sea of Jeju to blockade the coast of Jeju. And then around 70 years later, you would see another US ships in the Gangjang Jeju Navy base. I am comparing this to say that the history is how being continued today. Okay, this is called the Musulpo radar base. It was built during the Japanese imperialism, but this radar base was used during the Korean War by the United States military, and it was continuously used during the Vietnam War from 1958 to 1973, something like that. And it was returned back. It was returned to the South Korean military around 2005. It was a Bush administration, right? At the time, when there was a realignment policy by the Bush administration. So now it is used by the South Korean military, but as you know, the South Korean military is subordinated to the US military. So you can imagine that this base is still utilized by the US military too. So I'm bringing two topics here. If you see the left side, it was one of the killing sites during the Korean War. And then you see the two holes there. And then it was originally the Japanese military ammunition site when when Korea and Jeju was liberated from Japan. Now this is used as a killing site during the Korean War. So this, you see the example of how military base is used as a killing site when the war breaks out. And then the right one is during the 1948. At the time, the Lee Seung-man, the South Korean puppet, said to the U.S. General that I want to have a U.S. base in Jeju. It's interesting, isn't it? Okay, the third stage is at 1960s when South Korea was under the military dictatorship of Park Chung-hee. So this is the newspaper article of the June 6, 1969. And then at the time, the military dictatorship, Park Chung-hee, he says also, I want to have a naval and air force base in Jeju. So you can imagine then how Jeju has been coveted by all the South Korean governments, as well as Japanese and the US military governments. And it's interesting that I am bringing here the photo of Okinawa being handed over from the United States to Japan. I am bringing this because at the time, the Park Chung-hee was thinking that if all the military bases were withdrawn from Okinawa, then he wanted to have all the US bases to Jeju. He wanted to transfer all the US bases on Okinawa to Jeju. It's interesting, isn't it? But however, at the time, the United States said no, because Jeju was too close to China. So now we are going to the fourth stage of at the end of the 1980s. So if you remember the southwest side of the map that I told you that it was very heavily militarized. Now you see at the bottom, the Songhang Mountain, and then a little up, you see the Mosilbong radar. And then in the south west side, in the you see the long runways, which was the old Arthur airfield. What happened at the time was that the South Korean government wanted to have an air force base at the Songhang Mountain. And then there were people's big struggles during the 1980 to 1989 for 2 years. And then people succeeded. So they could, stop the Air Force Base project. And this was almost at the end of Cold War. That was one reason that this struggle could succeed. So what happened in 1991? You may remember that this is the very important period. In the United States, people hoped, oh yes, the Cold War is over and we could have a peace dividend. And then in Jeju too, many people dreamed, okay, yes, the Cold War ended and then we could have something very peaceful. Many people are very excited. It was the time. But it was also the time that the neoliberalism started all over the world, right? So what happened in Jeju was that there was a young man that you see in the photo in black and white. His name was Yang Yong-chan. And then he immolated himself. He left a testimony that you can read in the text. I aspire Jeju to be a place for our lives. I don't want Jeju to be the second Hawaii, a global tour site that exploits our flesh and bones, makes us playthings. I do not want Jeju to be the second Hawaii. I do not want Jeju to be exploited by the capital. It was his testimony. So it was November 7th, 1991. And because it was his death that the politicians in Jeju became to, seriously think about the preservation of Jeju. And then this text is important for you to understand how Jeju became the peace island, but also how the Peace Island betrayed the Jeju also. So at the end of the Cold War, I already told them that the many people dreamed, oh yes, we want peace, and now how peace is possible. First, Jeju should be demilitarized, Jeju should be denuclearized, Jeju should be neutralized, right? However, the very scholars, they betrayed themselves and people. Why? It was because of the US and South Korean alliance under the Bush administration around 2005, where the US government was holding the realignment policy of the US militaries all over the world, right? And then this kind of deceptive concept of Jeju is being continued today. In 2018, the President Moon Jae-in would say, I want Jeju Navy base as a foothold for peace. So you see how the concept of peace is being contaminated in the name of peace. So this is the current, the Jeju Navy base. So if you might know, that the Jeju is the very pristine region, and then the Gangjang village was the Gangjang Sea is a UNESCO protected sea, and the Navy base was built despite the people's protest. And what happened during the resistance is here. There are about 700 numbers of arrests, 600 numbers of indictment, and 60 individuals went to the prison. There are about 400,000 fines. There are about 30.4 million in USD indemnity against the people, even though it was retracted. 23 internationals were denied entries. 12 internationals arrested. One international got injunction order while another got exit order. So in 2016, the Jeju Navy base was completed. And this base was supposed to have two cruise terminals, two big cruise, and at the same time, 20 warships. And another name of this base was Civilian Military Complex Complex for Beautiful Tourism Port. And even though the Jeju Navy base is a South Korean base, thanks to the US South Korea Mutual Defense Treaty signed in 1954, the United States can use any South Korean bases and facilities anytime she wants. And according to the Strategic Digest 2015, the importance of Korea is acknowledged again. And then here is the reading. The nation's rebalance to the Pacific will result in a shift to 60% of US Navy fleet assets to the Indo-Asia Pacific region, many of which will spend time operating in the Korean area of responsibility, right? So here I just show you the images of resistance when there are the foreign warships such from the United States, Australia, and in Canada, especially especially in 2017. And here is an interesting picture. It's a Navy's promotion of the civilian military complex port. Here you see the many women, they are wearing miniskirts. So here I show you some pictures of the militarization. So whenever there is children's events or any other events, the Navy, what the Navy is doing is that they open the base, especially for children, and then they show children how to use the weapons, right? But if you see that there is a child, there is a Convention on the Rights of a Child adopted by the UN, which says state parties shall take all feasible measures to, in regarding to the children under the age of 15, that they do not take direct part in hostilities. It's one of the pictures of the militarization. Sometimes war exercise is held inside the village, and then they threat the people not in the civilian uniform, in the civilian costume. So here I wanted to show you that how the government and the Navy has been deceptive. They make deceptive apology. Oh yes, we are very sorry. We apologize for you regarding the violation of human rights and nature during the process of all the building of the military base. Still, President Moon Jae-in, he says, I want to make Jeju Navy base a foothold for peace. So you see the betrayal. And then recently there was a civilian military co-prosperity and development agreement last year, which was also very deceptive. It was this year. The people remembers the March 7th, the starting date of the blast of Guram in 2012 every year. And then last year, two activists entered the Jeju Navy base. One of them is Songhee Choi, who is now in prison. Today he hits about the 390th day in the prison. So this is the latest stage of the militarization. So I'll show you this slide again. In the east part that you cannot see, there is a plan for the building of the second airport, which people suspected to be an Air Force base. Not only that, I told you that there are some two radar bases around the mountain being planned. And also the latest one is the satellite center in the northeast side of Jeju. Okay. The first one is the second airport. In the east side of the Jeju, you see the planned area. And then you would see that this is the actually, this place is surrounded by the migrant birds, the sites, and also many lava formed the caves. And then inside the planned area, there are many sumkols. The sumkol means the pathway for water. So you can imagine what would happen with the building of the second airport. And of course, the people strongly resist to this project. And then there was a public poll, opinion poll, regarding the second airport project. And then this spring, many people said no to the second airport. However, the island government is still driving for the second airport. So we will see. Okay, here I want to connect the South Korean military's vision for aerospace power in relation to the Air Force Base project. It was 2014 that the Jeju Aerospace Museum was built, and then you can see that how the Air Force is visioning regarding the Jeju. So now I'll talk about the National Satellite Integrated Operations Center project, which is now being driven in the northeast side of the Jeju. And then the size of this center is about twice of the Jeju Navy base. the size of more than 150 soccer field. And then this site is 40%. This site is about the 40% of the government-owned land, NIS, and the 60% of island-owned land. There are many problems occurs here. One of the environment problem is that it is the site of the Jeju Gosari Sam. This is the only species in the world. This species only in Jeju, not in any other place in the world. So I'll talk about the two radars in the both side of the Hallam Mountain, which are planned now. The first one is Jeju Southern Air Route radar in the west side of Jeju. The other one is planned in the east side of Jeju, in the name of airport weather radar. And I already talked about the National Satellite Center. So I have left 2 slides. So my point is, so yes, okay, the Jeju is militarized. And what's the matter in relation to the world? The ships in the Jeju will go not only in the Sea of Jeju, but either go to the Hawaii, either go to the Hormuz Strait, either go to the South East China Sea. Because the Navy, the South Korean Navy, under the United States Indo-Pacific strategy, will carry out its role as well as its ambition of expansion. And then I'll conclude my presentation. It's not about Jeju, but about the THEAD in Soseongni, which will be talked more next time. The militarization of Jeju is also connected with this THEAD radar in Soseongni in the mainland of Korea. Unless you take out this THEAD radar, it's very hard for you to achieve the peace of Korean Peninsula and also Northeast Asia. Because the THEAD radar will work as an eye for the United States to make operation in this region and also the whole Northeast Asia. Thank you, everyone. So here is a map. And then I was focusing about the history of the militarization of Jeju and the current. So I divided with the 6 stages. Actually, it is based on the classification by Dr. Jung Young-shin. I was helped by his classification, and I added 2 stages of 5th and 6th. So the first one is about during the Sino-Japanese War in the 1930s, and then also the Pacific War before 1945. So I briefly explained about what happened from the 1930s until the 1945. How Jeju was militarized first by Japan and the United States. So it is the Jeju heavily militarized by Jeju as of 1945. The US bombers also flying over the Jeju. So this is the old Alter airfield. The Japanese Navy fighter planes would fly to Shanghai and Nanjing from this site. So this kind of military facilities was still used during the Korean War, even after liberation from Japan. That might be one of the key points. And then the US warship came during the April 3rd. And then 70 years later, to the Jeju Navy base. This radar base, heavily militarized, also used by the United States. And then you see how the ammunition site became the killing field. The 60s, there was attempt for base moving. Yeah, South Korea wanted to have bases in Jeju. So the 1988 to 1989, there were people just struggle against the attempt of the building the Air Force base there. And then we have Yangyongcheon. And then this is the end of the Cold War. And then talk about the peace started, but which was betrayed later. And then currently, the Jeju Navy base. And then we have now the Air Force base plan, second airport, and then other, the aerospace vision, and the satellite center, and the radars, and then the Navy's vision for the ocean power, corresponded with the United States Indo-Pacific strategy. So I wanted to not, talk over 40 minutes, but my talk was about 20 minutes. I am embarrassed, but I think it's better. Yeah. So if you have any questions, or if you want to talk more about the militarization of Jeju, yes, I'll be happy about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I think if we have questions about more details, then those might fill in some blanks. The satellite center is probably new information for a lot of people. I see a question here.
It was just last December that we found an article in the local newspaper that the plan is going on. And then, to be shockingly, even the island council had not known about the project. The NIS was secretly building in its own land. So, we were really, being shocked, and how the central government, the NIS, they did not talk even to the island council, and then was building the satellite center. The construction was already started in the NIS owned land. However, the island government owned land is now on the task. Now we people are pressuring the island council not to sell that part of the island owned land to the government, because once the land is sold, you would imagine about 10 satellite antennas from both the central government owned and island government owned land. The issue here is, it is related to militarization of not only Jeju, but also space. And then I think we really have to consider this issue of militarization of space. It is because without militarization of space, militarization of Earth is not possible. The space war already started in the beginning of the Iraq war in the 1990s. So it's not only Jeju, it's all over the world now. If you hear later, the story from Hawaii or any other sites, you would see how the militarization of our regions are now going together with the militarization of space. And then the satellite center, I think, is only the beginning. So it was about 7 years ago, one of the international activists, he worried that would Jeju be an aerospace war island? I could not believe that at the time. Now I worry about that. We have worried about Jeju Navy Base, Air Force Base, but now we are having another project of the satellite center in the name of a national satellite integrated operation center, and which the Defense Department and the NIS, they involve. Yes. How we can work together for the solidarity of for the Pacific region. Of course, we have several tasks. Not only several, we have some tasks. But I was thinking when I was preparing this, the presentation, the question in my mind was that, okay, we have a task of militarize our regions. And how about our mind? So I was thinking that the demilitarization of our lands, ocean, and space is not separate with the demilitarization of our minds and spirits. So that's that could be my answer. Yes, and then I expect my friend's answer too.